Okay, so in today's video, I want to give you a very quick update on my AtomRC Fear night vision wing project. Now, hopefully you would have already seen a video I posted about this a couple of weeks ago. In that video, I basically just gave you an overview of the build of the aircraft, and then I showed you me flying the aircraft in the dark. And I very much was flying the aircraft in the dark. The flight that I showed you was done, I think it's about 3 hours after sunset, and it is winter here, so it gets properly dark here very, very quickly. However, the location where I was flying was just outside of a rather large town, and it was very low cloud that day, which meant a lot of the town's lights were being kind of reflected back down. Basically, it wasn't pitch black. Now, in that video, at the end of it, I said that there'd be a part 2 video, and that's very much what this video today is going to be. And in this video, I'm going to show you me flying the aircraft in much, much darker conditions. The camera on board the Fear is the Caddxfpv Infra camera, and it's very, very good at seeing in the dark. And I very much want to show just how good it actually is. So in a minute, I'm going to show you some footage. Over the last couple of weeks, I've done several flights flying in much darker conditions. So I'll show you that in a moment. But before I do that, I just want to show you the aircraft because I have made a bit of a minor change. So as you can see, the aircraft now has some stickers on and it's got some tape across the leading edge. What I've done is I have added some LEDs to the aircraft. So in the last video, I put a strobe on top of the aircraft. And the reason why I did that is just so when flying at night, I could maintain line of sight of the aircraft, just obviously for legal reasons as well as sensible reasons. But the strobe didn't look very good, so I replaced it with some LED strips. So there's an LED strip running down here, and there's another one here. And then I've also got 2 LED strips on the back here. Now, these are green LED strips. As you can tell, I've got a bit of a green theme going here, and that's very much because like neon green is my favorite color. Prove that, because here is my radio, neon green. And I'll just power the LEDs on just so you can see what they look like. They are very, very bright LEDs. The LEDs that I am using, there we go. So the LEDs I am using is the FPV Pavo LEDs. And these are by far the brightest LED strips that I've ever had. And they're also very small. They're only 4mm thick LED strips, but they are incredibly bright. And obviously I've got the LED strips on the front here. They're actually underneath the tape, but they're so bright that the light is just shining through absolutely fine anyway. Now, at the moment, the LEDs are permanently on. That's just because of the way that I've got things wired and because of the limitations of the flight controller. I have bought one of these here. This is a PWM relay switch. I will be wiring this in at some point, and that will give me the ability to turn the lights on and off when I want to. Now, obviously, I did say in the last video that this was going to be a stealth wing. The whole reason why I bought a black aircraft was so that it'd be basically invisible in the night time. But I mean, initially I've added these LED strips just for the legal reasons, just so I can maintain line of sight. But actually, I've come to love them. I just think they look awesome, and as you'll see in a minute when I show you some footage, just seeing this thing flying around in the dark, it just looks incredible. It looks like something out of a sci-fi movie or like a UFO. It just looks really, really cool. So yeah, so that's the only change I've made to the aircraft. It's just adding these LEDs and adding the stickers. I happen to love aliens. And also it fits in with the green thing. But yeah, that's the only change I've made to the aircraft. So I guess the thing to do now is show you some flight footage from the last couple of weeks. Let's go. Okay, so this first flight was done at one of my favorite flying locations. It's somewhere that I featured in many of my videos in the past. It's a location which is in the countryside and it's up on top of the cliffs overlooking the sea. Now, there is a town not too far away, probably about a mile or 2 away, but it's down the other side of the hill, kind of behind a forest, so much of the light from that town isn't really sort of reaching this location. Now, the day that I did this flight, it was a beautiful, clear night. There was no clouds, so all the stars were perfectly visible. It was, however, a partial moon in the sky, just under a half moon, so that was producing a little bit of light. To the eye, though, it looked very, very dark. Absolutely needed a torch to sort of walk from the car to the middle of the field where I was flying. It was definitely darker than the location that I flew that I featured in the previous video. Now, just before I show you the flight, I just want to mention one minor issue that I have found with this build, and that is regarding the GPS. The GPS I'm using is the walk snail GPS, and I've used that on many of my aircraft in the past, and I know it's a good GPS. But I have found that on this build, the GPS is struggling to get a GPS lock. It's sort of taking between 5 and 10 minutes each time. Now, my theory is that the Caddx Infra is just producing some noise on the RF spectrum, and that's what's slowing it down. I don't have a spectrum analyzer, so I can't confirm that, but that would be my suspicion. But once the aircraft has got a GPS lock, it works absolutely fine. It just takes a little bit of time to get going. So anyway, let's now show you some flight footage, and I've got some footage here that was recorded by my spotter. And so, as you can see, the aircraft looks awesome as I launch it. Like, those LEDs produce, a lot of light that are very good at illuminating the ground and me around it. It just looks really surreal and really cool just watching the aircraft as it takes off and goes up into the sky. Now, once the aircraft's in the sky, you can see everything really clearly on this flight. Like I said, the moon was producing, a fair bit of light. But the Caddx Infra, it can just see everything. Like, I can make out every detail. I can clearly see all of the fields. I can see the boundaries between the fields, the paths, the roads, even all the little bushes. Like, everything is really clear and easy to see. And the stars as well. I mean, I've never done a flight with a drone where, I can see the stars at the same time as flying. And they just look really bright and really pronounced. And they just looked incredible. It was so cool being able to see the stars. Now, one cool thing about flying at night with an aircraft which is covered in LEDs is you're able to fly much further distances legally. Most places in the world, you have to maintain line of sight of your aircraft whilst you're flying. And if you're flying in a day, that normally restricts you to a couple of 100 meters. Now, at night time with LEDs on the aircraft, you can fly way, way further, especially when you've got nice bright LEDs on your aircraft like I do here. At one point, I actually took the aircraft out to 2 kilometers away. And as you can see here from my footage recorded by my spotter, you can still clearly see the aircraft. You have no problem seeing the aircraft whatsoever. I reckon I could have probably doubled that distance, maybe done sort of 4, maybe even 5 kilometers and still been able to maintain line of sight of the aircraft, which is just really, really cool. I was actually really surprised at how easily I was able to still see the aircraft just by having those LEDs on. So yeah, that's a really cool thing. I'm flying at night. There's a lot of benefits to flying at night. The weather's normally better at night time. There's less sort of dog walkers or Karens flying around. And it also means that you can legally fly long range a lot further, which is really cool. So as you can see on this flight, I had absolutely no issue seeing where I was going. Just that little bit of light that was coming down from the moon was more than enough to completely illuminate everything. I could clearly see all of the fields, all of the roads, all of the terrain, even the little bushes sort of dotted around the fields. I could see all of that absolutely clear as day. I had no problem doing this flight using just the moonlight. Now, one thing I do want to mention is I did encounter a bit of an unusual issue on this flight. This has nothing to do with sort of the aircraft itself, but it's more to do with the time of day or the time of year that I was flying. I found that, I think after about 7 minutes of flying, suddenly the aircraft became very sluggish and very resistant to turning to the left. Now, I don't know this for certain, but I'm pretty sure that the issue is that the servos on the aircraft were actually starting to freeze. It is winter here at the moment, and on the day that I was flying, it was exactly 0 degrees Celsius outside. So I think that the servos, or more specifically the grease inside the servos, was actually starting to freeze, and that's what was making the aircraft become quite sluggish. Now, luckily, I was able to get the aircraft back down. I had to do some careful sort of throttle control, and I had to really push the stick hard to the left to get it to sort of go back in the direction I wanted. But yeah, I did manage to get the aircraft back down, and there was only a minor bit of damage to the wingtip. But I guess that's something to bear in mind whilst flying at night, especially in the winter, is it is a lot colder at night than obviously it is in the day. And yeah, servos, they are not immune to the effects of the cold. Now, this second flight that you're seeing here was also filmed in the exact same location, although it was filmed, I think it was about a week later. But again, this was also filmed on a completely clear night. You could clearly see all of the stars. But there was absolutely no moon on this occasion, so there was no illumination from the moon. And that meant that it was significantly darker than the previous flight. This is probably about as close to sort of pitch black as you could ever want to get practically. Obviously there are a few sort of lights dotted around, sort of from like sort of buildings here and there in the distance, but to all intents and purposes, it was absolutely pitch black. And you could definitely notice that when doing this flight. Whereas in the previous flight, you could sort of clearly make out sort of the fields and the boundaries between the fields and things like that. On this flight, although you could still see those details, they were much harder to see. It took a little bit more effort to kind of sort of navigate where you were going. But it's still perfectly flyable. It did kind of require that you sort of knew the location you were flying, I think. Obviously I've flown this location sort of like hundreds and hundreds of times, so I sort of knew my way around quite well. I think if you didn't know the location, you'd probably feel a lot more nervous just because you couldn't make out as many details. But yeah, as I said, it was still perfectly flyable. And again, just seeing the stars whilst flying was absolutely incredible. An interesting thing I noticed on this flight actually is there was loads and loads of lights out to sea. You can see them here, all these lights here. I couldn't see hardly any of these lights with my eyes, so I don't know what these were. I'm going to guess boats, loads of boats out there, but it's just odd that I couldn't see any of that with my eyes. So therefore I'm guessing whatever those things were, they were purely illuminated as infrared light sources, not visible spectrum. But I just thought that was just really odd and interesting. But yeah, as you can see, flying in absolutely pitch black at this point, still perfectly doable, still easily see what you're doing. I did get my friend to bring a torch with him, just in case we needed it. And it's crazy how bright his torch appeared. You can see it here. I mean, the aircraft's like a good like 500 meters away, but I mean, it looks like a floodlight. His torch is so incredibly bright. And that's just how the Caddx Infra camera works. It takes a light source and it just magnifies it by like 10,000 and just makes everything look so much brighter. So yeah, as you can see, flying the aircraft in the absolute pitch black was still totally doable. Like the Caddx Infra is just an amazing camera. Like honestly, I can't stress enough how dark it was at that location. I don't think I could have sort of really found a much darker location unless I went to the middle of the desert or something. But yeah, even in that incredibly sort of like low light, the aircraft, I could still see where I was going. I still sort of just about make out like field boundaries and sort of like details in the field and stuff. And actually, as sort of the aircraft came into land, sort of get a couple of meters off the ground, and actually just the light from those LEDs on the aircraft then just illuminated the ground in front of the aircraft perfectly. So even if I was sort of coming in, sort of like trying to do proximity or something, even in those really dark lighting conditions, the light from the LEDs just kind of illuminated everything like car headlights would. And that just made it, you know, even easier to see where I was going. So yeah, hopefully these two flights I've just shown you here just go to show you just how good the Caddx Infra camera is. It was a much darker location than place I featured in my previous flight, but I still had absolutely no problems flying whatsoever. Now I did also do a couple of other flights that I just want to very quickly talk to you about. So I did do another night flight, this time down at the beach. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I did kind of discover that a weird kind of quirk of the Caddx Infra is because it's so good at taking light and magnifying it. If you fly somewhere that's got a lot of light, even if you're doing it at nighttime, if you fly somewhere that's got a lot of light, it actually makes it a little bit hard to see where you're going because everything gets so washed out. So here I was flying along the seafront, but it was actually really hard for me to sort of make out sort of where the beach was, where the sea was, and sort of where the road was, because there was so much light from the street lights on the road, which has been spilling out onto the beach, kind of washing out the beach, and obviously reflecting off of the waves as well. Actually, on that occasion, it made it really hard to kind of navigate. I ended up sort of calling that flight short, just because I was really struggling to kind of sort of work out where I was going. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird irony, I guess, that this night vision camera is so good at seeing in the dark. You need to only fly it in the dark. If you fly it somewhere where there's too many lights, it kind of gets a little bit confusing and a little bit sort of disorientating. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. The only other thing I just want to mention is I did do this was a daytime flight, and this was just an endurance flight. So I wanted to just sort of see how long could the aircraft sort of fly for, and sort of potentially what sort of like trip distance would it be able to achieve. So on this flight, it was a very boring flight. I literally just flew around in circles. It was an absolutely freezing cold day as well, so I was thoroughly frozen by the time it was over and done with. But I was rather pleased to see that I actually managed to do a 49-minute flight. This was done with the 3000 milliamp 4S lithium ion battery that I featured in my previous video. But yeah, 49 minutes flight. This is with all of the LEDs on the aircraft enabled for the entirety of the flight. And it was also quite a windy day. It was sort of gusting around sort of like 15 miles per hour. So I was really impressed with that. 49 minutes flight. I reckon on a good day, you'd probably be able to get an hour, maybe even a little bit more. And also I just want to point out that the trip distance at the end of that flight was, I think it was just over 40 kilometers, which means that in theory, you could do a 20-kilometer flight out and then a 20-kilometer flight back. So this aircraft is absolutely capable of doing long range. So yeah, so that's my update on my AtomRC Fear night vision wing build. I've really enjoyed this project. As I said in my last video, for years and years I wanted an aircraft that I can fly in the dark. And yeah, the Caddx Infra camera is absolutely what has finally allowed me to make this project reality. And I've just been really enjoying flying this. It's such a surreal experience, sort of flying in the night. And I've got many more flights that I want to do. I really want to, at some point, try and do a flight over the clouds on a moonlit night. I reckon that would just work absolutely amazing. And I want to do some sort of like some night chase footage. SpeedyB actually sent me this guy here recently. This is the B25 Cineroute pod. As you can see, it's got like LEDs all around it. And I've installed a Walksnail Avatar Pro camera on board, which is also a pretty good night vision camera. It's not as good as the Caddx Infra, but it's pretty good. So at some point, I want to do like a night chase video or something. I think it'd be really cool if either me or one of my friends flies the Fear, and then one of us chases with this. I reckon that's just going to look really cool. So yeah, at some point, hopefully I'll do that, and there'll be a video for you guys to watch. So yeah, that's basically everything that I've got to say for this video. I hope you've enjoyed this little update, and I hope you're impressed as I am with how well the Caddx Infra can see in the dark. And yeah, if you enjoyed watching this video, please do give it a like, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers, guys.